From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. These summer days can be slow ones in government and politics, especially the week of the 4th of July. But this week saw some interesting developments in the capital city. We'll start at Maxwell Air Force Base, where Congresswoman Terri Sewell was visiting to announce new funding for both Maxwell and the 187th Fighter Wing out at Danley Field. Maxwell will get $15 million to construct a new gate to handle commercial vehicles and improve traffic flow. The 187th will get $6.8 million for a new weapons load training facility to accommodate the arrival of the F-35. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott reports.
Pretty soon, citizens of Montgomery will have some new neighbors. A squadron of F-35 Lightning fighter jets will move into the Air National Guard base as the newest members of the 187th Fighter Wing. Montgomery is getting ready for them, and those efforts got a much appreciated boost from a member of Congress.
One of my most solemn responsibilities as a member of Congress is to ensure that our service members get the tools they need to do the jobs that we send them to do and to come home safely.
Congresswoman Terri Sewell is bringing federal funding to Alabama's Air National Guard for the 187th.
$6.8 million will go to the 187th Fighter Wing Air National Guard unit to build a new F-35 weapons load career training facility.
And funding to Maxwell Air Force Base.
For Maxwell Air Force Base, I'm proud to have secured $15 million to help construct a new inspection gate for commercial vehicles. This project will go a long way in ensuring the safety and security of our military personnel and assets on the base, as well as preventing unauthorized access.
The U.S. military is constantly working to protect citizens here in this state and around the country. So Congresswoman Terri Sewell decided to do something to help those who protect us by bringing some financial resources to the Air National Guard base here in Montgomery and right here at Montgomery's Maxwell Air Force Base. It's a move Montgomery leaders applaud.
These are things that not only help Maxwell and Air University, they help our entire community. They help the armed services, and they help the Air Force and Space Force get stronger and better together. And without Congresswoman Sewell really putting her foot down when it needed to be, I don't know that we would have gotten this. We've been trying to chip away at this for several years now, and she was able to help us close the deal. And we're grateful to have the support of our other congressional leaders, as well as our United States senators where this is concerned.
For Capitol Journal, I'm Randy Scott.
Just down the road on Maxwell Boulevard, the long-awaited opening of a new water sports park happened Friday. Montgomery Whitewater is among the largest man-made whitewater facilities in the country, with a 1,600 square foot Olympic whitewater channel and a 2,200 square foot adventure channel for rafting and kayaking. The park is meant to spur economic development and improve the gateway to Maxwell Air Force Base. The project received $5 million from the legislature in supplemental funds this past session.
This is a place of fun, of world-class competition, of healthy outdoor living, of great dining, if you have not had the food there. And this is the largest classroom in this area for our students, the largest outdoor classroom. So again, there is something for everyone.
I think this is a project that's indicative of the effort that you've seen throughout the partnership working with the city, county, our state leaders, our congressional leaders, and everyone in the private sector who has been a part of this. So I just want to say thank you. I think it's a great day for Montgomery. I think it's a great day for the river region. I think it's a great day for the state of Alabama. And I look forward to seeing all of you, not only today, but coming back out here to support this project in phase 1 and phase 2, and talking about the positive things that are happening in Montgomery, talking about the positive things that are happening on the west side of Montgomery, and talking about the potential we have to strengthen our partnership with Maxwell Air Force Base and the men and women of our United States Air Force.
It's really more about sharing land and sharing a fence line. It's about the shared interest that we have, the earnest interest in seeing the community the city, the county, and the state of Alabama succeed. Not just for the men and women who are elected or asked to serve here, but for the men and women with whom we stand arm in arm in the communities within which we live and we raise our children. This is an absolute honor to serve here, to raise my family here, and to succeed and to see the earnest investment that continues to be made in support of not only military families, but those that make and have called for years and decades the River Region their home.
This development for this district would bring a lot of economic development. It brought a lot of life to this area that was down. I say that, and so that's why I'm so excited. That's why we fought hard to try to get funding for this district. For Montgomery Whitewater. I pray that we can continue to get the funding to finish the project for phase 1 and phase 2, so that we can see the growth and the development of this area.
The Joint Legislative Contract Review Committee convened this week for its regular meeting to scrutinize state contracts. Receiving the most attention were legal contracts submitted by the Alabama Department of Corrections for lawyers to assist in the various lawsuits it is a party to. 26 of the contracts are for attorney Bill Lunsford of the firm Butler Snow. Those, along with the 3 contracts approved last month, could potentially total $22 million, with the largest one capped at $9.9 million. While those numbers do raise eyebrows, the department noted that most of those were not new contracts, but rather existing contracts with existing dollars that had to be resubmitted because Lunsford changed law firms. Representatives from the Attorney General's office and the Department of Corrections told the committee that Lunsford is the expert they need in these cases, and that choosing other law firms would be duplicative and more expensive.
You mentioned, Mr. Robertson, that there was a time when DOC felt that keeping these types of cases together was advantageous. Perhaps. It would seem so. Are these cases substantially similar to the behemoth of the Braggs case?
There's more than one big case, and sometimes, I don't want to say anything that's going to alert people to suing us more, but sometimes we have various levels of defendants in the department, and depending on which level defendant is involved, sometimes it would make sense to have the same representation for uniformity in defenses.
Moving forward, is it the department's intention, in conjunction with the Attorney General's office, to try to handle as much of this litigation in-house to try to reduce some of these costs?
Funny you should ask. The Department of Corrections has 2 types of litigation ongoing. We have damages cases where it's normally inmates or somebody suing for money damages, and then we have our big injunctive cases, which are Bragg's, Department of Justice. We have 2 Department of Justice suits, and there's a 4th one that I can't remember off the top of my head. Those are asking for injunctive relief. They're asking us to change things we do. They don't want money. The Attorney General's office in April pulled all the assistant attorney general designations for the 6 attorneys at the Department of Corrections. Therefore, Department of Corrections attorneys can no longer represent the Department of Corrections. So we are unable to bring any of them in-house, so the Attorney General's office had to assume those. The 4 injunctive cases that I mentioned, DOJ, Bragg's, and Duke, the 4th one, those we remain in-house, and Mr. Lunsford, this is one of those. Mr. Lunsford does represent us in that one. And to kind of piggyback on what Ms. Robertson was saying, a lot of these cases, damages and the systemic litigation cases, have overlapping fact patterns, overlapping claims. If we parceled it out to different attorneys on each one, we would have duplicated efforts and actually cost the state more money, because we're having to do the same depositions twice. We're having to do the same litigation twice, because we would have different attorneys.
There's not much dispute in terms of liability here, in terms of like some of our issues and overcrowding and conditions,
correct,
staffing and so forth. So a lot of this continues to drag on, and it just ends up costing us a lot more money instead of just trying to figure out a way to work it out. But I don't have an issue with the $9.9 million. I mean, Lunsford is basically a government agency at this point.
New budget numbers out this week show that the state's general fund is up 16% through this fiscal year so far. The increase is largely due to earnings on state accounts, thanks to interest rates being increased by the Federal Reserve. Deposits on state accounts have increased $264 million so far this fiscal year. That's an increase of 1,700%. Kirk Fulford, Chief Budget Officer for the Legislative Services Agency, said the increases are expected so long as interest rates remain high. The Education Trust Fund receipts were up just slightly after declines in April and May. The Alabama Department of Veterans Affairs held a panel discussion on helping Alabamians build a resilient lifestyle. Called Operation Resilience, the panel discussion featured service members and veterans who have displayed or experienced resilience throughout their civilian or military careers. Capital Journal's Karen Goldsmith reports.
Maya Angelou once said, "I can be changed by what has happened to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it." That is the spirit of resilience.
Operation Resilience, a panel discussion to help all of us, and veterans in particular, identify resilient practices to have in place before the crisis happens. The 4 panelists are current and retired members of the U.S. military. Each answered questions specifically based on their areas of expertise, but all 4 shared their favorite resilient quote they deploy during tough times.
Because Romans 8:28 is my go-to. It says, "And we know that all things work together for the good for those that love God and called according to his purpose." May not be good during that moment, may not understand, but that gives me resilience to understand that I'll get through because God said so.
If I had to choose Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. If you think about the process of sharpening iron, it's a difficult process. It's tough, and it takes time, it takes skill. And the outcome of that is a more durable, more capable, more powerful product. And I think that applies to us in life.
I think about Psalm 18, which says, "I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress." And it's through the storms of life, like the story says in the Bible, that if you build your house on a rock, when the storms come, the house will stand. And I think sometimes of great times of adversity, you see what your rock is, what you're standing upon. And I think about that.
Curtis alluded to a quote that is really funny. It's from that great philosopher, Rocky Balboa. And it goes like this. It ain't about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And that's true. For those of us who've been in the military and face challenges, sometimes you go on deployment. And as Jocko said in the video, sometimes you just have to say intact. Every life, a little rain must fall, and wake up and say, you know, that's good, because I'm going to learn something from that.
Coping with crisis, or during one, may require different kinds of assistance. We don't take crisis management lightly. So if you need assistance, if you are in a crisis moment, pick up the phone and dial 988 for assistance.
And the website, vetsforhope.com, is filled with crisis support resources, including a list of service providers located around the state. For Capital Journal, I'm Karen Goldsmith.
Last month, the Alabama Medical Cannabis Commission hit pause on the process of awarding business licenses. That decision came after several companies complained about the application review process, with some deciding to sue over the results. During a court hearing Friday, Executive Director John McMillan said the Commission plans to resume that license process on August 10th. That's according to AL.com's Mike Kaysen, who attended the hearing. One company that did not receive a license and is suing opened its doors for a look inside a medical cannabis production facility in construction and voiced its concerns with the licensing process.
Right now, we just have to say the scoring was obviously seriously flawed. Members of the commission themselves made reference to catastrophic kind of situation they were in. So I don't know what all those flaws are. We want to be able to look behind the curtain, as it were, and find out what those flaws were, because we know they were there. If we receive a license, all of the products will be limited to the forms that are approved by the state and the commission presently, which includes sort of gummy-like ingestible products. Tinctures will have a wide array of tincture oils, and some topical products. They will all be extracted and formulated in this facility here, right on site, so there's minimal risk of errors with transportation or contamination. So this is all a very tight ship, as it were. I mean, in reference to a previous question, I've been around a great many medical cannabis and other cannabis companies, legal companies in this country, and this is poised to be a really great one.
They just need to do their job, review the actual applicants, review the sites, and make a decision based on the criteria that are set forth in the statute. Cultivate within 60 days. How fast can you get up to speed, rather than these paper applications that, as Dr. Garderman said, they don't really bear any relationship to reality. So unless the commission comes out and makes an actual decision based on its expertise, then it could go on forever.
We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
Joining me next is State Senator Chris Elliot from Baldwin County. Senator, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, y'all had a pretty interesting contract review meeting this week. They're always kind of interesting because these are the meetings where y'all are reviewing, hence the name, all of the different contracts, especially the legal contracts that different agencies are going into. And sometimes it's easy to poke at these things because it just looks like a lot of money. These agencies, in many ways, have to contract in a lot of times. But what really was highlighted this week was the prison situation. We reported on this some this week about lots of money going to really one law firm, one lawyer. And it just looks, it kind of jumps off the page at you, but y'all are able to ask some questions.
Well, we are, and that's the good thing about contract review is it really allows the people's representatives to start poking and asking some questions about why we're spending the amount of money we're spending. And certainly when we start spending it in one particular area or spending an awful lot of it in one particular area. And one of the lawyers that has represented the Department of Corrections for years and years in a number of different lawsuits has recently switched law firms. And so all of those contracts had to be redone. But to your point, it really did shine a light on just how much legal work not only that one attorney was doing, but how much the Department of Corrections was contracting, and how much we were spending on legal defense and legal services for the Department of Corrections. And lawyers can get expensive, but when you start talking about tens of millions of dollars, that is an awful lot of taxpayer money spent, certainly on one department. And there were some good questions asked, and I think that the Department of Corrections attorneys, in concert with the Attorney General's office, really did a good job kind of explaining why we're spending that kind of money. But this issue with corrections and with our prisons and the federal lawsuits has certainly become a money pit that we are having to foot the bill for, and it is frustrating. We see so many other needs around the state to see so much of that those funds being expended on attorneys really to defend the state government from the federal government, and I just could think of so many other better places to use it.
Well, I've noticed that you kind of kept your powder dry on Transportation. That's usually when those contracts come up where you go, especially because this one was about that bridge project down in Orange Beach. Walk me through just the top points of what's that bridge project all about, and why is the state having to defend itself?
Yeah, so yet another money pit, unfortunately, and that bridge project is about another bridge across the Intracoastal Waterway. And I, of course, am always in favor of additional ways on and off the island that I represent, and that many Alabamians go to. And we have over 8 million visitors a year. That's more than every man, woman, and child getting in a minivan and driving to Gulf Shores or Orange Beach. But getting them on and off the island is a challenge. The Department of Transportation determined that they did not want to enter into an agreement with the toll bridge company to widen and expand the existing toll bridge there, and instead to build another bridge right next to the existing toll bridge.
Well, yeah, you can see it from the bridge.
You can, and obviously the methods and the theories used to arrive there have become an issue. Judge Poole here in Montgomery issued, I think, what could independently be described as a scathing order against the Department of Transportation and its director about the methods used to arrive there. But my issues today here were yet more money, over $1.4 million in legal fees to build this bridge. And you have to wonder, is this, are we looking at the totality of the costs of some of the decisions that we're making at the Department of Transportation, and whether or not that's the way we need to head? And really, again, if it's a $60 million bridge, but we're adding $4 or $5 million in legal fees over here by the time it's done, that's not to include the legal fees associated with the right-of-way acquisition. That's not to include the legal fees associated with discovery in the governor's office and whether or not executive privilege extends to certain communications between the ALDOT director and chiefs of staff and the governor. I mean, this thing just continues to get more and more and more expensive, and you have to wonder, was that the best way to proceed? Oh, and by the way, still no bridge.
Well, I noticed that when I was down there the other day, but you can see it, but I guess the litigation stopped it, right?
It did, and that's the question, is that going to continue to be the case? And if that's the case, we've spent an awful lot of money with no solution, and that would be very frustrating.
Switching gears, I wanted to talk about your beef with the Department of Archives. You had said earlier, or I guess you've now filed a bill for trying to recapture some of their budget, and it's based on this program they had for Pride Month, which was in June, about Alabamians who, throughout history, LGBT, that kind of thing. You objected to it, said you want to talk about their budget going forward.
Well, so a number of my colleagues were really shocked to learn that our Alabama Department of Archives and History was highlighting this LGBTQ plus programming inside the Alabama Department of Archives and History. And my issues there is that underlying that conversation is not the conversations about individual Alabamians and their achievements, but it's the fact that we're highlighting these folks because of because of the LGBTQ stuff, and that is because of what they do in their bedrooms. And I don't think that that's what ought to define those individuals. If you want to celebrate them because they've made some sort of meaningful contribution to society or business or whatever, then so be it. But do we really need to be talking about folks in the context and separating them because of what they do in their bedrooms? And I just don't think that's appropriate.
Wouldn't you say, wouldn't it be fair to say that being gay or being lesbian or whatever has, is something society-wise, especially here in Alabama, has been something to overcome, and it's just sort of part of the fabric. Why shouldn't it be at least a part of what the history is taught?
Yeah, I'm afraid I just take issue with that, and I've seen other journalists come out and say, well, this is the same as being black, or this is the same, and it's just not. This is something that's predicated on what somebody does in their bedroom and with whom they do it. And I just don't think that's something that we need to be discussing in the Alabama Department of Archives and History. And this continued drumbeat that we see from corporations and from the federal government, pushing what is, in my mind, a hypersexualized conversation in our culture is just something that I don't think the state of Alabama ought to be involved in. I don't think we ought to be using state resources in. Now, I understand that a lot of this programming wasn't funded by that, but it was, it was in a state-owned building with state staff and everything else. I want to make sure with this legislation that we send a message to the bureaucracy here in Alabama that says, look, stay out of these types of conversations. Don't be promoting this. Stick with archives and history, and let's stay out of underlying issues that have to do with what somebody does in their bedroom.
So what would your bill do? It would essentially try to claw back money. Is there a way to do that, really?
Yeah, there is, and it's important to note the Department of Archives and History does some great work and work that I'm very proud of. It's one of the preeminent archives and history departments in the country, I think. I think they're a little misguided on this, but we're not talking about any of their operating funds. We're not talking about their general fund appropriation. We're not talking about their education trust fund appropriation. This was a supplemental appropriation, extra, if you will, that they received. And it is my intention and my colleagues' intention. It's important to note there's broad support for this, but it's my colleagues' intention too to make sure we send a message to Archives and History, to its director and to its board, that when the legislature calls you and says, hey, we think maybe you ought to not do this, and you go ahead and do it anyway, you're telling appropriators no.
I was going to ask if y'all had conversations before all this.
We did, and Director Murray and I talked on the phone. I know Director Murray got phone calls from both House members and senators encouraging them to not move forward with this program. They chose to do so anyway, and so that's the danger you run into when you're telling appropriators, no, we're not going to do this. So this is supplemental money. My understanding was that it was to be used for some capital expenses, and we think there's the opportunity to claw that money back. And again, the intention is to send a message that says, stay out of this area.
Well, it takes, 2/3 to bring it up out of order in special session, so we'll be watching closely to see if you get the votes. We're out of time, Senator, but we'll let you get back to the beach where everybody else seems to be. So
I'm headed south.
All right. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Few individuals in the history of American sport have possessed greater athletic ability than Bessemer, Alabama native Vincent Bo Jackson. Auburn University's second Heisman Trophy winner, a 3-time All-SEC and 2-time All-American selection, Jackson is the only running back in Auburn history to rush for more than 4,000 yards in a career. In 1986, both the NFL's Tampa Bay Buccaneers and MLB's Kansas City Royals drafted Jackson. Deciding not to play for the Buccaneers because they didn't want him to also play baseball, Jackson signed his first professional contract with the Royals. The next year, the Los Angeles Raiders drafted Jackson with the understanding that he would also be allowed to play baseball, making Jackson one of the few athletes to succeed in both professional football and baseball at the same time. In March 2013, ESPN Sports Science named Jackson the greatest athlete of all time. He was inducted into the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame in 1996 and the College Football Hall of Fame in 1998.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Next, I'm joined by Daniel Urquhart, Secretary of the Office of Information Technology. Mr. Secretary, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Now, you're brand new on the job, right? I know that Mr. Redden retired after many years, and so you're the newest member of the governor's cabinet, so congratulations.
That's right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I was hoping, we love to have new members of the cabinet on, and it's a good opportunity, and new lawmakers, it's a good opportunity to remind our viewers and educate them on just what these agencies do. So Office of Information Technology, can you kind of walk us through the basics of what your agency does?
Sure, absolutely. Well, OIT was formed in 2013 via legislative act upon the passage of Senate Bill 117. So the primary function was a IT governance and policy organization, with the operational runtime of all the IT folks, all the technical staff being members of the Department of Finance Information Service Division. Mm-hmm. So that was that stayed that way in place, and really the scope of OIT was executive branch, all agencies, boards, commissions, the smaller agencies. It doesn't really include the legislative, judicial, or education branches. In 2017, legislation was passed to move all of the operations of Department of Finance ISD division under OIT. So the role changed a bit. You were the one governing and also the one actually turning the knobs on all of the technology. So definitely a big methodology shift. Some of the three basic things that OIT is tasked with, and it's legislation from different agencies, so it's still kind of cobbled together. But if you piece it all together, the three high things are IT. These are all related to IT. So governance, strategic planning, and resource management. Kind of unpacking that a bit. The governance aspect includes all of the policies and procedures, all of the things you're supposed to do or not supposed to do on state networks. Watching the internet, or you can't spend all day doing things you're not supposed to do.
So your team comes up with policies that state agencies follow as it pertains to how you go about using technology.
Right, absolutely. And it's a lot of agencies use those overarching policies as they go through regulatory audits.
Okay.
We've got several state agencies that are IRS or FBI CJIS or HIPAA compliant, so they refer to those policies to help. Now, in addition to that, they have their own policies that may be more stringent, but we provide that baseline level of policies for governance that agencies follow. So also part of that, part of our role is contract management. We go and procure state level contracts for technology for desktop computers or servers or professional services, whatever people need to do the business. And those are open to everybody. The executive branch government has to go through OIT to procure some of those services, but other agencies like a local city, county can use those contracts as well if they choose to. A lot of them negotiate their own, but we do it for the state as a whole and open that up to city and county government. So it saves a lot of the smaller municipalities the time and effort of going through all of that contract bid and management and procurement and negotiation. So
yeah, I'm sure a lot of them don't have the staff power to really do that kind of thing.
Right, absolutely. So it's a big benefit for the small municipalities. Some of the bigger cities may negotiate their own contracts, or with education, for example, the Supercomputer Authority kind of handles a lot of that for them. Totally separate branch, but a lot of people are open to use that if they choose to. We also provide telecommunication services for all of the executive branch agencies. So if you have data needs, internet needs, if you need to access the state network to conduct business, or if you need telephone services.
Well, that's right. I know that there was a big change recently going from sort of the old generation to the new generation in terms of all these agencies that use phones and internet, I guess.
Right, and that was definitely a challenging project that started in 2018 with a modernization of a 30-year-old phone system. So it's a copper-based technology which the carriers aren't supporting anymore, mainly because it's just expensive. And every time it rains, it goes out. So it's a lot of service disruptions. But yeah, we started that project in 2018, and it was about a 3-year project to convert everything over. And then in 2022, we went through the decommissioning phase of the old 30-year phone system. And it was kind of challenging just because even the carrier, it was using billing systems that are 30 years old. So we had to track down all of the inner workings of the system to disconnect everything. So it saved the state $600,000 once we finally kind of put that one to rest.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting, thinking about the different generations of technology. No more rotary phones.
Right.
Let me ask you about cybersecurity, because when I hear OIT, I hear, okay, you're keeping all these agencies safe. I'm thinking about cyber attacks. We live in this era of cyber attacks that happen all the time. Some of them maybe go under the radar. Some of them are front page news. Talk about your agency's role in preventing cyber attacks and maybe responding when they happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a good bit of the executive branch agencies on our network, so we have visibility into all of the email traffic or anything that goes on the network. So we have a couple of managed service providers that actually do 24/7 monitoring of those systems, and we have escalation alerts baked into that. So if something happens, we get intelligence reports back. We also have state and federal partners as well with Homeland Security. It's definitely a community environment, and everybody has information shares. So we have integrated with a lot of the agencies. We provide information to them, and we're onboarding new agencies as well. Mm-hmm. So they can kind of share in the monitoring of their specific events.
Interesting. I'm trying to think of an instance where, like, why somebody would want to hack into, like, have a cyber attack into the state. I mean, obviously there's a lot of money going around. We've got a military department. What are some of the hot spots where you see more activity in terms of, threats?
Typically people, a lot of the bad actors, you'll see them go after public websites. Those are the easy things to deface. They'll take public data. The larger ones are where they're going after private confidential data. So obviously a lot of the agencies that have citizen-based data are at a higher risk because they have information that the criminals want.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of tax season and stuff like that. Well, that's fascinating, and it's reassuring knowing that there's an entire agency dedicated to this, and that you're not just doing it on your own. Have contract and federal partners. Let me ask you about wireless downtown. I know this has been another project for y'all to make sure that all the state employees that work downtown have access to wireless. Talk about your efforts there.
Sure. 2022, we started a project to modernize that. The infrastructure was aging, and that also aging infrastructure creates security issues, obviously, because manufacturers quit patching after a certain time. So we started a project in 2022 to modernize all of our downtown wireless connectivity for agencies that utilize OIT services. It was roughly 50 agencies and 22 buildings that we upgraded infrastructure in. So
basically all around here.
Right, right, all around here. So it was a really good project, and it provided updated technology and better security for our users, as well as flexibility. So yeah, very, very excited about that and looking to expand it outside of the campus as well.
Well, Mr. Secretary, before I let you go, can you talk about your background in this field and what led you to be appointed by the governor to be Secretary of OIT?
Yeah, in 2020 I came over to OIT. First of all, I've been with state government for 20 years. Last 3 were with OIT. I was serving as Deputy Secretary under Marty Redden. So really got a good view of OIT and how it functions as an agency. And how it serves all of the other executive branch agencies as well. Prior to that, I spent 17 years as the agency CIO at Alabama Law Enforcement Agency. And while there in 2018, we built a separate independent network to meet FBI regulatory requirements. So very detailed project, involved a lot of collaboration with industry partners, as well as, obviously the regulatory agencies, and several big name partners. I'm not really going to mention any of them, but that was a very detailed project that kind of set them up for years to come.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I really appreciate you coming on the show to walk us through some of these interesting issues that maybe we don't think about a lot, but are really important to how our state functions. We're out of time, but thanks for coming on the show.
All right, thanks for having me.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Located in the heart of Alabama's aerospace industry, the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville is dedicated to the U.S. space program. The collection spans the history of spaceflight from early 20th century rocketry pioneer Robert Goddard to present day. The permanent collection includes the Apollo 16 command module and one of the 3 remaining Saturn V rockets. Although the center is well known for its historical collections, it is perhaps better known as the home of the original space camp. This world-class educational program began in 1982 as an effort to encourage children to explore careers in mathematics, science, and technology. Space Camp provides children and adults alike with an opportunity to experience what it would be like to be an astronaut. An historical monument to the U.S. space program, the U.S. Space and Rocket Center continues to not only preserve artifacts and archives, but to inspire future exploration and explorers.
Ever since the discovery and confirmation of the Clotilda in the Mobile River, fascination has grown about America's last known slave ship to cross the Middle Passage. Now this weekend, the Heritage House Museum is set to open there in Africatown. Our own Randy Scott just aired a special documentary focused on the Heritage House, Africatown, and the Clotilda. Randy joins us now, and Randy, I gotta say, terrific work. Great documentary. Congratulations on a fine piece of TV.
Oh, thank you, Todd. I appreciate that, but I can't claim all that to my own. Greg Morrison, Vita, who was also featured in the documentary herself, she's a descendant of the descendants. So she is speaking from first-hand basis, like so many people in the Mobile/Africatown community, Pritch community, who have been saying for years, you know, this story is real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have some clips to air from. It's a 30-minute documentary about this, so we can't, that we aired on Alabama Public Television Thursday. It'll air again. It's online though at aptv.org. There on the homepage, you can watch it, and we'll air some clips in a minute. But I wanted to ask, just kind of going back, what led up to this project for you and your partners?
Well, for me, it was something I heard about even going back to college when I was in school at Troy University. And I had classmates who were from the Mobile area, friends, fraternity brothers, you name it. Mm-hmm. And whenever we would go down, they would talk about the history of Africatown and what it was all about. And this gentleman named Cudjoe Lewis. I was thinking, okay, why would they name a guy Kudzu? Because, there's that plant growing all over the southeast named Kudzu, but no, it's Cudjoe. Mm-hmm. And he was one of the last people to come off of that boat, the Clotilda, when it sailed into Mobile from all the way from Africa.
Right.
And doing some research, and even after college, when I was working in Mobile in television, always hearing about Africatown, the Clotilda. What is it? And when you talk to people about it, and especially those who live in Africatown, who are descendants, the one thing they will always say, it's over there. Mm-hmm. It's over there.
So they always knew, mm-hmm. But it was almost just like lore. But after searching for all these years, nobody, I guess, was able to confirm it until it was just a few years ago, right?
2019. Okay.
Ben Raines and his team and some folks like that.
They found it, and they had all the information, as you hear in the documentary. Mm-hmm. There's many different questions about, is this really the boat? Well, they had specs on the boat. They had composition matters, all the information they needed. So when they went down and examined it, they could tell this is it. Mm-hmm. And then they also, because of the fact that why it's down where it is in that location along the river, is because after the trip was done, allegedly those who were behind it to hide the evidence decided to burn it, to sink it, so no one would find it again.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it was found.
So they tried to destroy it, maybe even a couple of times, mm-hmm. because yes, this is far after that had been outlawed, and so this was a bet that they talk about. Mm-hmm. But you talk about sort of it being more of a local legend, lore, all this kind of stuff, and something passed down. I remember reading about the Clotilda in state newspapers and everything, but it wasn't until that Netflix the Obamas produced a couple of years ago, maybe, mm-hmm. That it really highlighted all that for us. So it's really, ever since the discovery, starting to get a lot of national attention. Are they trying to capture that national attention and try to really yield that into something that can be productive?
Yielding it into something productive on the level of showing people that throughout all that they've been through, the mm-hmm. descendants of those 110, as they call them, mm-hmm. survived. They came here with nothing. They started their own community. They purchased land for their own community, and they survived. Now, in the years since, of course, their descendants there are some who are still in that area, and others have spread out throughout the rest of the country, as far away as, I believe, Chicago in some cases. But they wanted to show people that the story was not just rumors, it was fact. And they have been saying all along, that ship is over there, that ship is over there, that ship is over there. And Vita, who's in the documentary, said it as clear as it could be. It's not for us, because we already know where it is, where it's been. It's for people who didn't believe or either weren't sure if it was there. Here you go. There it is.
Here's the proof. And I enjoyed that part of the documentary when the historian comes in and explains, like, this can be traced back, and this proves that it was the Clotilda. This proves the whole story. It's not just about this one relic, one piece of the ship or whatever. It's the proof, and it's the story, and something that I think we all need to know. Well, yeah, I saw that you went out on a boat with Veda, and I just, what was that like? What was that like, being out on the site with somebody, a descendant? I'm sure she looked kind of emotional herself, just taking it all in.
Very emotional for her, because this is where everything occurred for her family. After being taken from Africa and brought over here, this is where that ship literally dropped them off, and where it was destroyed, or they thought they destroyed it. And so began the story of their American experience, or their life in North America. And it was something that was so important that family members made sure that all their descendants, all their children, all their relatives knew of this story. And people...
Well, it's a unique one. It's a unique one, and how unique, you can read about it in history books, you can watch documentaries, but knowing that you're the descendant of somebody who was on that boat has to make it just much more personal, and you can kind of see it in her eyes and hear it in her voice.
And you ask, how did it feel being there? To me, I got the same feeling, or feeling similar to that, when I went to Ground Zero in New York City, when I visited the tomb of Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King. You just can't say anything. You just sit there and try to soak it all in. And you think along the lines of, what was it like for them? What did they see when they came here? What did they hear? What were their emotions? What were their feelings? And you see this area and you think, nah, it's just marshland, it's just swamp area off Mobile River, but it holds a story, a very deep story. And it's not just for that area. Keep in mind, like you said, it was something that was done after a law was passed to say that slavery was over. It wasn't supposed to happen.
Or at least the transport, yeah.
The transport. And that means it has an effect throughout this country, because it actually happened. People actually sought to do this and did it. Yeah. And so because of that, some people, as with Vita's family, they started their story here in the Americas, and how they managed to survive and live after that and cope with what happened to their people, and managed to get along with it. And mind you, that area, Africa Town, when it was established, it was it was a self-sustaining area. They actually had businesses, they actually had schools, they actually had stores, you name it. They were self-sustaining. And then another part of the story is how that somewhat faded away. But you ask, what are they doing? What do they hope to accomplish? They hope to revitalize it in terms of getting people to really understand what this area is all about. It's not a tourist attraction by no means, but it's definitely a history lesson for people to take in.
Well, I had just read that they're sold out of guided tours for this foreseeable future. So if you wanted to go, it might be difficult right now. But yeah, it opened. The Heritage House opens this weekend.
Yes.
It's fascinating. I really encourage everybody to go and watch this documentary. Again, it's online at aptv.org, right there on the homepage, and it'll be airing again on public television. But the quickest way to do it is right there online. But Randy, congratulations again. Thank you for bringing this story, and we'll be following it going forward.
like I said, it wasn't just me, Greg Morrison, Vita. They also had a yeoman's share, a leadership share in taking this, because they were definitely driving forces behind it as well.
Well, thanks to all.
Yes.
And now, as promised, here are a few clips from that special Africatown Heritage House documentary.
The Clotilda made its way across the Atlantic to the Kingdom of Dahomey, now known as Benin. That is where the human cargo was purchased and loaded into the hold for the voyage back to Alabama. Sneaking by federal patrols under the cover of darkness, the Clotilda arrived at 12 Mile Island on the Mobile River and offloaded the Africans onto land owned by the Mayer family. Then, to hide the crime, the vessel was set ablaze, sinking into the muddy riverbed, and was only rediscovered 158 years later. I know this was just a camp. Just a place, but this is like a historical place. The last documented slave ship to illegally bring Africans to the United States.
A tough topic for some to talk about, even today.
Oh yeah. It's never been tough for us to talk about, though. We have always wanted to make sure people knew about it.
But as she and other descendants will tell you, the story of these people doesn't end in this moss-covered section of Mobile River.
My ancestors, my third great-grandparents, Polly and Rose Allen, were on the Clotilda. They were 2 of the 32 people who founded Africatown. So my understanding is they were 2 of the people who, after they got out of these marshes, were enslaved for 5 years.
For me, this is a continuation of what was instilled in me, but an opportunity for us to now invite the community, Mobile. The community of Mobile is an opportunity for us to invite those in the state of Alabama, but the world, right? The world to come and learn about our ancestors, who they were as individuals. What's important to me is also the stories of those 110 survivors, the story of those individual families. Learn about each of those individuals and learn about the resiliency of who they were as individuals, as Americans, as Africans, and just a continuation.
Confirmation that the wreckage had been found spurred efforts to honor the 110. That interest jump-started a local movement to make the linkage more tangible. Instead of erecting another historic marker or simply renaming a street, community leaders agreed that a permanent museum and educational center was needed to carry the story forward.
So the Heritage House was an answer to a problem. The problem was we had artifacts from the ship, from that first dive, and the community said, we want this to be able to be displayed, and we want it to be able to be displayed inside Africatown.
Good morning, everyone. This regular meeting of the Mobile County Commission is now called to order.
Mobile County Commissioner Massaria Lutgood's district includes Africatown. She, along with the county's legislative delegation, used a lot of political capital to galvanize community and financial support to create the space.
Well, there were no options because you need special facilities because of the fragility of the parts from the ship. And so the idea of Africatown Heritage House was to create a space inside the community that was properly built and designed to be able to handle those artifacts. So nobody wants to do an exhibition that has like 2 tanks of ship parts. And so the next phase will be, well, we don't want to do it just like that. We need to tell a complete story because the ship is incidental to the story of what the people did. And so we need to be able to tell the story that the ship is a part of the story, but to tell the entire Africatown story.
For Meg Fowler, the Heritage House Project is an opportunity to create an accurate and honest portrayal of the legacy of the 110. A key to that process is the opportunity to exhibit artifacts from the wreckage of the Clotilda, which had been submerged for more than a century.
So the objects are on loan from the Alabama Historical Commission. They are the state preservation agency that are the stewards for, among other things that are found in state waters. So they have loaned the pieces of the shipwreck that they have recovered from the site in the Mobile River, and each piece that they've recovered tells part of the story that proves that this was in fact the Clotilda. So each piece, whether it's the composition of the wood or of the iron or the way that you can tell that a piece of wood was burned, each piece tells part of the story and confirms that this wreck is in fact the Clotilda.
Again, great work, and that's available at aptv.org. We'll be right back.
Russell Cave is located in northeast Alabama in Jackson County. It is a significant archaeological site with deep deposits that are a result of frequent use by Native Americans for thousands of years and offer a glimpse of lifeways from the archaic to the historic period. Russell Cave was named a national monument in 1961. Today, the cave is part of the National Park System.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.